A very big welcome to this fortnightly MPW web series. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Robb, the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World. Delighted to be here on what I'm sure is going to be a wonderful session, one of our most requested, in fact, the most requested in the survey that we put out asking people what we wanted: COVID-safe events and risk management. And before I get underway, what I'm going to do, as always, I'm just going to put a poll into there just to get a sense of who's with us tonight, what part of the audience they're from. And as I do that, I'm delighted to welcome our panel. Joining us from Perth in Western Australia, Dave Budge, who's the Operations Director from the event team. Hello, Dave. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good evening, Chris, and welcome to everyone around the world. Great to join you again.
Nice to see you. Thanks so much. Moving across to Dubai in the Middle East, Connor Rainey, Senior Health and Safety Advisor, JAM Middle East. Hey, Connor.
Hello, how are you?
Great to see you. With an accent like that, I'm certain that you're heralding from Ireland, but wonderful to see you joining us from Dubai. Thank you so much. And then a man who's moved a lot to make this happen was on King Island off the Tasmanian coast of Australia the other day when he was able to confirm. It's now, what are we talking about, 10 p.m. there, Richard Welsh. Thank you so much for joining us. Richard Welsh, Managing Director, Epic Events and Marketing from Hobart in Tasmania.
Thanks, Chris. Always a pleasure to do these things, and it's exciting to see how global tonight's group is. So well done to you for getting a lovely group of people together in the industry.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, there we are. Just as we see, mass participation sports, 55% of the audience, some people from government, not-for-profit, a few others. So as usual, the mass industry well represented as we would expect. I'm just going to drop another panel in there just to find out which part of the industry you come from while I continue with the rest of the introductions. So just a quick piece of housekeeping. You are muted on this, but you have the opportunity to chat in both the Q&A and the chat. So really encourage you to drop any questions in as you go along. I'll do my best to bring those into the presentations. We are recording live on YouTube, so those of you that might need to duck off, you can come back and watch the end, or obviously, of course, share with your colleagues and friends. And the recording, which will be slightly edited, will be posted on the YouTube channel, the MPW YouTube channel, within the next probably 48 hours. Just a quick update on many of the other initiatives that we at Mass Participation World, for those of you that might not be aware. Every alternate fortnight to these, we have the Strength in Numbers, which is just a Zoom room which I host. We do a Singapore time on a Monday afternoon, and then we do Singapore time on a Tuesday morning to cover the globe. So Monday afternoon, Asia, Middle East, Europe; Tuesday, Australia, New Zealand, and Latin America. It's just a once-off registration. If you haven't registered and you'd like to be a part of that, I might ask Tom just to pop the details in the chat, or otherwise send me an email, chris@chrisrob.asia, or follow on LinkedIn, Mass Participation World, or my personal LinkedIn. The Aid Station, the weekly podcast, a wonderful, wonderful interview today. Went out yesterday on 93rd edition. An incredible 93-year-old lady, Betty Jenkins, the oldest volunteer in the Chicago Marathon. A hugely inspirational story and a great chat. The next web series is on the 25th of March, which is looking over the fence, lessons from other industries to help return to live events. We're hoping we're going to have someone from the Canadian ski industry, someone from a shopping mall, and hopefully someone from the airport industry to see what we might be able to learn from dealing with massive crowds that those people have been dealing with whilst they've been open. And then a really exciting one, I've been hosting a few. I hosted the first one a couple of weeks ago for World Athletics. I'm hosting another one on the 18th and one on the 30th. On the 18th, we have a wonderful lineup. We have McKinsey and WFSGI, which is the World Federation of the Sporting Goods Industry, who are going to present a global sports industry report, which is going to be quite fascinating. We have Stefan Moven from Sweden talking about some of the initiatives of an alliance they've pulled together there. We have a really interesting group from Germany, Marcel Altenberg, crowd scientist, who some of you might know, Dr. Matthias Krull, who's the medical director of the BMW Berlin Marathon, and Dr. Florian Kaisinger from Think Health Ventures. They're going to share an initiative that they launched a couple of weeks ago in terms of trying to help mass participation and outdoor events come back. So I'm going to be hosting that. It is at 1300 Central European time, which is an hour later than tonight. So wherever you are, 1 hour later on Thursday the 18th, we'll be sharing some details of that, and World Athletics will obviously as well. Just about coming to the end of the housekeeping. If you've got any ideas, questions, or anything that you might I might be able to help you with, chris@chrisrob.asia. Look on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And then if you're not subscribed, which I'm fairly sure most of you will, every Friday we put out the road ahead with what's happening over the next week. So tonight's a different format. We've done this one once or twice before. It's fundamentally a presentation format. So each of the presenters is going to present for about 15 minutes. And we're going to have participants, volunteers, and spectators, kicking off with Richard. He will be followed by medical and testing, which will be Dave, and then we'll wrap it up with permits and operations from Connor. And then in between that, I'm going to be popping a few more polls in there as well, and I'm going to do one quickly now as I wrap this part of it up, just to get a sense of who has COVID plans. And then at the end of it, we should have about 8 to 10 minutes of Q&A. And the idea would be to wrap it all up by on the hour and get underway with letting people enjoy the rest of their day or night. So let's move on and welcome back Richard. If you'd like to do a quick screen share and share your presentation. Quick reminder while Richard's doing that, please feel free to put questions into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll do my best to moderate those as we go through. Sit back and enjoy the presentations. Over to you, Richard.
Beautiful. Thanks, Chris. Can you see me okay? All good with the screen?
Can see you there. Can see your slides. Thank you. All good to go.
Beautiful. Thanks, mate. So just a bit of context for my events. I've got a little events company here in Tasmania in Australia. And from the outset, I should say as well that Australia's handled COVID pandemic pretty well. We don't have any cases in Australia at the moment that I'm aware of. And life is returning to a pretty good place at the moment. Governments, we normally hate them, but to their credit, they've done a pretty good in controlling the virus. So we've had some events popping up. Last year, I was one of the few guys that didn't have to cancel any events in 2020. In fact, I held an event in 2020 that I didn't have in 2019. So I think that could be one of the only ones getting around the world that didn't go ahead in 2019, but did in 2020. And the events that I've held recently have been fun runs in the Northern Territory, cycling events in the Northern Territory in Darwin, and also running events in Tasmania since sort of August. Everything shut down in Australia in March, much like the rest of the world. And April, May, June, July was a no-go, but from August we sort of started having some smaller events. And just on the 28th of February, we had an event in Hobart, which, to the best of my knowledge, I'm happy to be corrected, was the largest fun run in Australia since the same event last year, which was the Hobart Run the Bridge. And we had 3,800 participants. So most of the talking that I'll do will be relevant to that one with 3,800. And that was under what our state government called a level 3 framework, which allowed us to have up to 5,000 people at the event. And that 5,000 included participants, volunteers, staff, spectators, and everybody involved with the event. So I'll get into the participants, and naturally communications was pretty important, and we communicated with all the participants right up in the lead up from the confirmation emails that they were getting to the content on our website, plenty of social media posts. We felt like there was a balance to get a challenge to get the balance right between promoting the event being safe while at the same time encouraging people to enter. And so that marketing mix, we found a challenge to get the right mix of pushing people to do the right thing, but also come along, we want you to do the event like we all do. And none of our events are sellouts here. So we're always trying to get as many people to come along as possible. And some of the signage that we got, our government had created some generic posters and billboards that we were able to use and print up and put that in our comms and have some signage around the events as well. The other big part that our government were keen on was contact tracing, of course, a pretty common term that not many had heard of before COVID. And so we had two elements to our contact trace, well, three really, but in terms of the participants, one was the expo that happened in the days in advance. So we were using the timing chip and the registration platform. We used Race Roster for the first time, and that worked really well for our purposes this year at our first expo in a COVID-safe environment. So we were able to manage and to determine when people came and see their timing chip, when they picked up, what time they picked up. So if there was an outbreak, we'd be able to track down the people that came in a certain time frame that the government would want to find out about, so they can then go back and do contact tracing on those people if there was an outbreak. Fortunately, we're 11 days after the event now, so I don't think we've had one, so we're pretty safe. So, but we, as part of our COVID permit, we had to hold that, and we still have to hold that data for 21 days. So another 10 days and we're in the clear and we can get rid of it. The other information that we had to maintain for contact tracing was on course, of course. And so a couple of ways we did that, and much of it we had set up in the past anyway, including gun chip timing. So we knew when people started. We had a 10-kilometre event, so we had a 5K split mark. So we were able to find out if, for example, Joe Bloggs that ran 59 minutes and 20 seconds for the 10K ended up testing positive afterwards, and the government came back to us and said, we need to know everybody who was near Joe Bloggs who ran 59.20. We'd be able to find that person's start time, their split time. And we also had 6 photographers on course in strategically placed positions spread out with taking photos. And we used, again, the Race Roster platform, and they were able to match the participant numbers to their results, and we'd be easily able to trace any people on course that proved to be positive if that was the case. And the other big thing we put back on the participants was the responsibility for them to do the right thing. Our event was the first one in Australia in a long time to be of this size. And again, if there's anyone out there with something that wants to tell me I'm wrong and there was a bigger event, I'm all ears, but we believe it was. And so we put it back on the entrant to help the industry to recover and return to full strength. We want everyone to do the right thing. So most people do multiple, events in the mass participation world. So hoping to get everybody to do the right thing and impress the officials and the authorities that came along and witnessed to the event. And we did have a couple of people come along from the government to make sure we're doing the right thing, to ensure that the next event can go ahead and the event after that, and that governments are happy to start opening up. So moving on to volunteers. A couple of things that we did here was limiting the number of community groups. So like many of you, we use various sporting clubs and community groups to provide officials. We actually streamlined it and only went for 2 or 3 community groups rather than a whole bunch of them. That way we were able to keep a closer eye on the contact tracing for the volunteers and the data, and there was less people to deal with. And we had a key person within each volunteer group that we just dealt with them and they dealt with the masses. But again, as part of our COVID safety plan, we had to collect all the data of every volunteer, what time they turned up, and our technology was really good to track the volunteers through the back end of that Race Roster platform. The COVID safety plan was sent out well in advance to the participants, even though, funnily enough, we only got our approval 10 days before the event for the government. And they send this funny worded email confirmation saying it's not an approval, it's an authority for you to continue planning your event. So they give you the green light 10 days out, assuming that you've been sitting on your hands doing nothing, waiting to get this magical letter from them. But obviously we all work through that and know that it's coming. I've got another event in 3 weeks' time and I've not received the approval for that yet, but you plough on the assumption that it's coming along. And we made sure that the authorities were across all of the communications, so CCing or BCCing them in all of our communications to let them know that we're doing the right thing, that we're keeping up with our COVID safety plan, just to give them a bit of confidence that we haven't just written a plan, but we're actually executing it and implementing everything that we said we would. And it just adds credibility to our industry when we can do that. But the key thing I took away from that part was only include elements in your COVID safety plan that you know that you can control. An early event that I did back in August last year, I said, we'll give every volunteer, we'll give them gloves and we'll give them a mask and everything. And the lovely person from public health and the government rang up and said, are you really going to make sure every volunteer wears a mask? That's pretty challenging to do. So I took that out of plans and no one's second guessed it. And I just don't think, certainly where we live, masks aren't mandated, and obviously everybody's in a different part of the world here. But in some parts in Australia during the last 12 months, masks have been mandatory. So it's not uncommon for people to wear them. But there was just an example of things that we were putting in the plan to impress the government and the authorities to make sure that we were doing the right thing and conscious of it, but then actually turning around and going, we might not be able to implement that and ensure that it happens. So if you don't think that you can fully control it and authorize it from your end, if it's not a deal breaker for it, then take it out of your COVID plan. The next one was Spectators. And we all love that atmosphere around the finish line and on course. And it goes against every grain of fibre that we have in us in event organisers to tell people not to come unless they're participants. So our message to participants was come ready to run 15 minutes before the event, do the event, cross the finish line, get your medal and water and go home or go to a local restaurant for a cafe or something, but leave the site. And that was similar to Spectator. We said, don't come. Certainly, if you're going to come and when we can't stop you, don't come to the start line or the finish line where we've already got mass gatherings of people. So if you're going to come, go on course, because that's an area where we put in our COVID safety plans that we said to the government, these are on public roads. You've got 10 kilometres of public road. So you can't make us responsible for ensuring that the whole 10 kilometres, both sides of the roads, is free of mass gatherings. So we were telling people to go out on course, spread out, do the right thing. And ultimately, we had no troubles with that at our most recent event. And the other thing we did was invested a lot better in our live stream. I'm only a small company, but we tipped a little bit extra money into that and had a pretty good live stream. We got about 6,000 views on our Facebook page. We had 6 camera angles and a couple of commentators, and it was really fun to try and jazz that up. It was the 4th year we've done it now, but we don't commercialize our broadcast. We're only a small event, but given we had half a dozen Olympians in the field and some fast times, I think the winner went 28-28 for the men and 32-21 for the women. So they were pretty slick and people wanted to watch that. And we've got a unique battle of the sexes element as well, where the women get a head start over the men, the difference of the race records. So it was quite spectator friendly. So I've only got a couple of minutes to go, but a couple of key points to wrap up. So here in Tasmania, which if you haven't heard of us, you poor thing, we're down the tiny little island off the south of Australia. We like to call ourselves the South Island, down the bottom right of the map. Our government set out events framework, which basically has 3 levels. So level 1 was up to 1,000, level 2 was 1,000 to 2,000, and level 3 was up to 5,000. So I've delivered 1 in each category so far, and the hoops to jump through, depending on the size of them, gets greater and greater, as you'd expect. The first one I had was a level 1. The next one we had was level 2, and most recently a level 3. So I've now applied for 2 more level 3 events in the next 3 or 4 months, and pretty confident that now we've got some runs on the board with the government that they'll let us have it. I have found that it's been bureaucrats have been in their element because they're loving a form. Our government set a really good high-level framework, And then the bureaucrats have just been fumbling the ball and just making it so difficult. If I wasn't full-time at this, if I was a volunteer, I wouldn't have bothered. It's been really difficult. And some tears have been shed trying to get these things approved over the last few months. And I've had some help from industry insiders. Shout out to Michael Jolly, who I know has jumped on this from my team at DTE. He's been terrific in helping me out with some of those. So by all means, seek out some help. In Australia last year, we created the Australian Mass Participation Sport Events Alliance, AMSI, and that group and the collaboration in that group has been terrific, and lots of people sharing ideas and thoughts. And Dave Budge, who you'll hear from next, he's on that group as well. He'll attest to it, that it's been a great collaboration and opportunity to share information amongst the event organisers. So the only last two things would be to demonstrate your event can be delivered within the framework. And if you include something in your COVID safety plan, make sure you can implement it. And if you don't think you can, don't do it. The last one I've got is just a funny little tale. We had work cover, they call it here in Australia, came to assess us, and they rang us on the Friday before the event. And I said, look, they clearly hadn't read any information. We sent them dozens and dozens of pages of information. This poor guy rings me up on the Friday, hadn't done any of the reading, hadn't done any of the research. And I said to him, mate, go and read it and ring me back. No, I need all your time now, he says. And I said, fine, go to the start line. There'll be road closures around. He goes, oh, will there? Why will there be road closures? Mate, it's a big event on, right? So he's just not in the event space at all. He's got no idea about the industry. And these are the people that are coming to assess that we're doing the right thing. Our elite women race started at 7:05. He arrives at 7 a.m., makes a phone call to my start line manager, who obviously didn't take the call from a random number because he's off dealing with police and traffic and elites and timekeepers and all those things. He left a message, and we checked it at 10 o'clock that night, and it was a long, boring message, that not the sort of phone call you want on event morning. And in his report, he said he took some photo, he rang the organiser, left a message, took some photos and went home. And that was a 3-page report. And after all that effort, I haven't heard from anyone at government since, and the event went ahead, no problem. And we haven't had an outbreak. We haven't had a case in Tasmania in 300 days. The end, Rob. Chris?
Fantastic, Richard. Thanks for that. Whilst we let Dave load up his there, I'm just going to put another poll in here quickly. Just get a sense of what people think from a budget impact this is going to have on them. And yeah, just a couple of takeouts there. A couple of the things stood out for me. I love the idea of BCCing or CCing government in your communications to make it look like, or make them aware that you're not, make it look like pretending that you're doing it, actually showing them that you are doing it, which is wonderful. I really like that one of make sure that your plan is what you can deliver, because surely that's where you're going to get marked down, isn't it? You promise to do a whole bunch of things and you don't do them. The whole point about making the authorities aware that the public space is their space. So I guess again it's a bit of collaboration and probably has to be ironed out in the planning process. I know. We've had on Strength in Numbers a couple of calls. Dermot, who's on here tonight, in Ireland, they're saying, we know you can deliver an amazing event. We know it's absolutely fantastic, but we're absolutely worried about the spectators that are going to come into the city. So it might not, in many other countries, be as simple as just saying the route is not ours, the access and egress by public transport is not ours, because that may stop you from getting your permit. So certainly, one of the things we've been speaking about is that you need a spectator plan. You need to be able to integrate that into parts that are more locked down than Australia at this stage. And then, great to see, and I've seen this across a couple of Australian states, is that there's a very clear framework, which I think in many parts of the world there isn't. People are still really wrestling with what is it that we have to do, and how can we fulfill the requirements when there's not even a framework. And what was interesting to me there is, even at this stage that we're a year in, 28% of people in the poll said they don't have a written COVID safe plan. So I guess maybe that means that they don't have events happening. That was an interesting stat for me. I'm just going to share the results of the budget impact. 10% seems to be the norm. 58% of people reckon it's going to have a 10% impact on their total budget. 10% say minimal. And there's 10% say more than 25% of their budget. But now hand over to Dave Budge. Thanks again, Richard, for those insights. Dave, welcome, and look forward to hearing your ideas or your experience around two massive swimming events.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Richard. So, look, a lot of what Richard had to say will be consistent with the medical and testing, certainly through our experience as well. Hope some of those bureaucrats aren't tuned in tonight. You might have a little bit of issue getting your approvals through next time, but we try and stay apolitical when it comes to that. A year in. So I think I heard on the news tonight that it was a year today or a year yesterday, might have been an old report, that the WHO declared COVID-19 as a global pandemic. So we've been doing this for 12 months. 12 months ago, we were all scratching our heads and wondering, what does this mean for us? When are we going to be able to run events again? Are we going to be able to run events again? I'm based in Perth in Western Australia. It's probably one of the more isolated places in the world, similar to probably Tasmania in a sense. And we too, after a period of working out what this thing is, have been able to run events again. So we've been running events since September last year. So as Richard mentioned, I am also a member of the AMPSI committee, which has been a great opportunity to share ideas. And so I happened to mention to the group this morning that, we're doing this presentation tonight. I'm looking at medical and testing. Here's my experiences and what's everybody else doing. Just if I could, give some alternatives to what we've done, because we've largely been unaffected in what we've had to do. We've had minimal infection rates. One little spike about a month ago that caused a bit of chaos that I'll talk about. But other than that, there hasn't been a great deal of requirement, for anything significant changes. And one thing that was absolutely clear was, and touching on Richard's point, is everyone seems to have scaled back. What they're doing, their COVID safe requirements. Last year, everybody was including, doing this and doing that, and making probably life a little bit more challenging than it needed to be. And I'm talking about some of the major event organisers in Australia that are part of this as well. So the learnings from that, and certainly dealing with different tiers of government. Mass participation sport has kind of fallen under the radar in the events world. There's certainly a lot more focus on music style and festival events where, probably a lot more people, a lot closer contact, and subsequently, a higher risk of infection. There hasn't been a lot of consideration given to what we do. Making that, your plans around everything that you do, whether it's operational, whether, it's what kind of we'll present on in a moment, sort of has to fit the situation that you're in. There's no need to go above and beyond, because, it'll stretch your resources, and your ability to deliver could, have a negative impact on how you deliver things or you set outcomes. What I'll focus on shortly, we're talking about purely mass participation sport. You may be aware some of the big elite competitions in team sports that are going ahead at the moment are operated under a hub environment. We don't have that, luxury in doing what we do, and we can't sort of isolate people. We can't test them all frequently. We can't, have them participate in an event and then, take them off to a lavish hotel and keep them away from any risk of infection. That's not, what we do. That we've seen the tennis recently, the Australian Open, and obviously football and cricket do it as well. For us, we have to deal with what we've got day to day life. So, managing around what we're doing there. So most recently, we've been able to deliver 2 major swimming events in Western Australia. One of them, the Bustleton Jetty swim, which is a 26-year-old event. Bustleton's about 2 hours south of Perth. It's become a really iconic event. It sells out in a flash. We have 3,400 people participate. We've had about 1,000 on the wait list. Swim around a 100-year-old jetty. So it's a 3.4 kilometre swim. And a week after that, we had the Rottnest Channel swim, which is 31 years old now. So that's a really iconic swim. So it starts on Cottesloe Beach and swims 19.7 kilometres to Rottnest Island, the tourist destinations off Perth there. Again, that was a sellout event, and usually these events attract interstate and international participants due to border closures and restrictions at the moment. Purely WA events, West Australian events yet still sold out. So there were the 2 that we had to manage. Now, the Busselton Jetty swim, WA had been travelling beautifully for nearly 12 months. Minimal infection rates. Any positive cases that we had were from returning overseas, travellers that were isolated in quarantine, locked away until they were able to. None of them generally went to hospital. They were all sort of not that serious. But as has happened in other parts of Australia, probably other parts of the world as well, the old security guard who was quite active in the community also drove a ride share and had quite an active social life, tested positive and took it out into the community, and that was our first community spread for nearly 10 months. So everything was locked down. So it created all this angst around events, including a hard closure for everyone in the Perth metropolitan area in southwest where Busselton sits. So that posed some issues around everything. We had to change how we delivered that event. The border, so 3,400 people entered that event. 75% of them live in Perth and would normally drive down to participate in that event. They couldn't drive to the southwest until 1 minute past midnight on the day of the event. So that caused all sorts of issues and looking at that. So, if you are in that situation, I guess the lesson learned from that is that things can change and change quickly. So make sure that you do have alternative plans. So in terms of medical and testing at events, a lot of the medical messaging was about, the emphasis on your suitability to attend. And that has to be pushed through all your communication platforms, through your web, through your media, social media, through your EDMs. So that just, from the minute you launch, from the minute you're promoting your event, that has to be front and centre in terms of your messaging. Just around event time, if you're unwell or experiencing symptoms, if anyone in your household has tested positive or exposed to, or have you been exposed to anyone that's returning or self-isolating from any hotspots in the eastern states of WA, we're in the western states, or overseas. And if you have answered yes to any of those questions, then you need to consider the safety of everyone else, the integrity of the event, and whether or not your suitability to attend. Richard mentioned about putting the onus back on participants, and that's certainly, the days of people that, we've all probably worked with people that say, they turn up to work half dead. Well, those heroics, I think, aren't tolerated anymore. I think everyone's had someone sneeze and a cough in the office behind them. I think the reaction for people now in shared space is a lot different from what it used to be. So that's always been strong. So that sits as part of the communication from the outset. You reinforce that, or what we've done with those events is directly personalised email to all participants the week of the event, just to reinforce those messages. And again, if they have any issues, if they have or have any concerns about those, then contact us and we'll provide advice on next steps, or what they do, whether they need to go and get tested. Initially we thought, this is going back to last year when no one fully understood what the process would be or what the costs were involved about having testing at events. But the reality of that is, at that stage, that the cost is prohibitive for most events, particularly at the moment if they're capped in size and you're running on reduced revenue, then the cost of that. But not only that, the timelines that it takes to return a test. And there's most metropolitan major regional centres have facilities to conduct those at the moment. So use the facilities that are there. That's what they're set up to do. That's how the world's responded to that. On event day as well, so at pack collection, we had a third line of questioning, if you like. So just a volunteer at the door, just making sure that asking those questions again, just to reiterate and the importance of that. We haven't done it in discussion. We do a 70.3 event. So I spoke to the Ironman people today in terms of that third line testing. You still see it occasionally in shopping centres, temperature checking as well. So, an elevated temperature could be for various reasons. So it doesn't automatically disqualify you, but if you've got a high temperature and symptoms other than that, then we would recommend that you go off and you leave the site, you go off and get yourself tested and all cleared, before committing to the event or putting anyone at risk. In terms of the operations, the medical setup, and again, most people that I've spoken to have agreed that there's not a substantial requirement to make major changes to the medical operations of the event, because the standard operating procedures for event medical centres, whether they're a first aid post or more elaborate field hospital type setups, is that standard operating procedures would meet the COVID requirements anyway, in terms of hygiene, in terms of contact tracing, and certainly in terms of the appropriate PPE for those that are working there. The only change that we have had to make, we're currently in a position for all internal space, whether it's a building or whether it's a marquee, that we are required to have 2 square metres per person. So just making sure that anticipating how many people that you're required to service at any one time, and that you've got adequate space for that as well. So which has meant for our events medical centres, we've increased the size, the capacity there, so that we can spread people out. As again, reinforcing what Richard said, working with your local health department and medical providers, the advice that that we were given again is that don't commit to things that aren't deliverable or are impractical. We were way back in, I think it was May last year, when we were first sitting down and writing out our first COVID safety plans, which ended up being version 40 by the time we finished them off. And that health department of Western Australia said to us that there's no need to do temperature checking or body scanning or full testing, because you won't be able to afford it, and it's not practical. It's already out there. Use the resources that are there. And as I mentioned, prepare to make modifications to all your plans, not just your medical plans as well, because as we have experienced ourselves, we were thought, people in Western Australia perhaps got a little complacent and thought we were progressing to relative normality, and then that incident happened the other day. So we had one case. We have a Conservative government that has done everything to keep our infection rates low, and so they've done a really good job at that. So one person tested positive, potential community spread. 2 million people, the population of Perth, were locked down, had to wear masks for 2 weeks, and it was during a time that we had events, so we had to make some fairly substantial changes to our event operations to get it up. We were privileged in a position that we didn't have to cancel, that we were able to go ahead with those events. But from what we had originally planned to what we ended up delivering, we had to change that up a little bit. So just bear that in mind. That is just part of it. Again, talking to one of the AMSI members the other day.
It's starting to run a little tight on time, so if you wouldn't mind to move it along to the next one, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it for me. But we're seeing events being postponed and rescheduled in a short period of time. It's not something that we would have seen before. So yeah, that's the new world. So if you've got any questions, fire them in. But hopefully, we've got a big spread of people from all over the world, and hopefully you're in a position that we've been in, and you're able to get back and start delivering events. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dave. Thanks very much. I'm just going to pop another poll in about contact tracing while Connor gets ready. A couple of key takeouts for me there. Interesting. I think some really positive news there for a lot of people. The indication of of starting to scale back now that events are on. So not so much intense COVID planning. The fact that the sort of sense of no major change requirements to existing medical plans, which I think is music to ears. In line with that, 58% of people on the poll seem to think that it's only going to be about 10% impact on their budgets. If you think about this time a year ago, Connor, if you'd like to get your slides ready while I do this, that'd be great. Thanks. People were wondering whether it was going to be 25, 30, 40, whatever percentage of their budgets. People were terrified about the financial implications. So that's good. A couple of other key points. Fit the situation that you're in. Great news in terms of sellout events, oversubscribed events on both of those that Dave was talking about. And I think the really valid point, and we've seen quite a lot of this, our webinar, I think the one after this, we're going to bring in some people that have had to cancel at short notice. The Round the Bays in Auckland in New Zealand 2 weeks ago. I think I'm saying correct in saying it's the biggest running event in New Zealand. They had to cancel with 24 hours notice. Tens of thousands of participants. So we're going to try and get those people on panels and get some learnings from them. But yeah, just going to pop the contact tracing one in there while I hand over to Connor to give his presentation. Thanks again, Dave, and over to you, Connor.
Thank you. And to confirm, you can see my full screen, yes?
We're seeing your next slide screen at the moment. So you've got the presenter view.
Double check, sorry.
Lost it now.
Okay, share.
Got you now, thanks.
Got it, perfect. Okay, so my name is Conor Rainey. I am a Senior Health and Safety Advisor for JAM Event Services. We supply health and safety and event personnel to events all over the Middle East, basically. So without further ado, we shall get into it. 1 second. So I'm here to present about the Dubai Ride 2020. So it was part of the 30 by 30 Fitness Challenge. So the 30 by 30 Fitness Challenge is a directive from the Dubai government for each person to be active for 30 minutes for 30 days. The Dubai Ride is the sort of statement event of that, which generally happens towards the end of it. Previously, it was a Dubai Run, but because of COVID, it switched over to be the Dubai Ride. So the people behind the 30 by 30 Fitness Challenge and the Dubai Ride, Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, or known as Sheikh Hamdan, it's his directive. He's the son of the ruler of Dubai and very much a fitness fanatic. So it was his directive that the 30 by 30 challenge happen, and this is sort of the result of it. It's been running since 2017, I believe. DTCM, so the Department of Tourism and Commerce and Marketing, were our the main client of the event. And again, they issued the permits for the event. So the slides that I'm going to show you sort of made up many presentations that we had to do to many government departments over the course of about 7 weeks, tweaking plans, and so sort of we gained the permit through showing these to them. Emma Clark was our event director, who was Link Viva. Link Viva were tasked with the production of the event. Jeremy Doncaster was the operations director. Andy Fordham was the race director, and Modus One was the traffic management team. So the route plan, which I hope you can see my cursor, the event happened on the Sheikh Zayed Road and the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Boulevard. The yellow lines here that you can see is the Sheikh Zayed Road. So we shut down the Sheikh Zayed Road for a period of hours on a Friday morning, which is our weekend, or the rest day of Dubai. Because even though it was sort of a middle of the night to early morning thing, there's still the Sheikh Zayed Road is a main artery of Dubai, one of the busiest cities in the world, one of the busiest roads in the world. So there was an economic knock-on effect to us requesting the road to be closed down. So it was a bit of a battle between the RTA, the Road Traffic Authority, and Dubai Police us to have it for as long as we possibly could versus them wanting us to have it for as short as we possibly could. The green line here that you can see is the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Boulevard. That was the route for that was the track or the road for the family route and the People of Determination route. So for the road closures, for this event to happen, we had to have approximately 35 individual road closures. Those were 35 roads that fed traffic onto the two main routes. Each one of those road closures required at least one police car, at least 2 traffic marshals, and then the water barriers, the cones, the lights, the battens, everything. So all 35 of those took management from Modus One to be able to, for us to get the call to say the roads were closed and it was safe for the public to go on them. So the RTA road closures around the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Boulevard. So you can see here, this is the Burj Khalifa. So it's sort of one of the most iconic roads in Dubai. It was there for the pictures and the Instagram moments. So again, the road closures around. Just to have a note as well, this area in the middle is residential. So we had to have a separate emergency management plan for this, that in the event that, say, somebody had a heart attack or a medical incident within the residential areas, that we had a shutdown procedure for the family ride just by itself. So for the event to happen safely and efficiently, we divided everything up into separate zones. So you can see here SF1, SF2, and C1 were our 3 start finishes for the main event, or sorry, for the general ride, I should say. The F zones were the family route. The P zones were then the parking. So I have a route timeline to sort of give you an idea as to how the hours happened, the 8 hours basically that we were a live event, we'll call it. So from midnight, the pre-deployment of our infrastructure started going out. So that's the road barriers, traffic management, LED screens, all of the overlay and support, the support equipment started to be laid out in strategic locations along both routes. From 1:30, we then had police support to install the infrastructure. So we didn't have road closures at that point, but we did have police cars who were there with some of our operational team and site management teams who were directing traffic around the work that they were doing. From 2 a.m., we then started having partial road closures. So I hope you can see my mouse, but this space here was our start-finish line for the main race. And just here beside where cinema parking was our start-finish for the family ride. So from 2 a.m., we started having partial road closures, less traffic around. We were able to sort of do more work in that regard. Similarly, at 2 a.m., our second start-finish line, we started having partial road closures around here so we could get our overlay out. From 3:30 a.m., we started to have a partial road closure of the Sheikh Zayed Road. So again, the support roads that were feeding traffic onto that began to be closed off. From 4 a.m. we had a full Rta Road closure. The road was then handed over to us to put out our various marketing, water stations, hand sanitizer stations. All of that was then handed over to us. 4:15 we started preparing for the early arrivals, the people who were the keen fitness fanatics who wanted to come and take the extremely unique opportunity to cycle as fast as they could down the Rta Road. From 4:30 we started opening up our car park areas, so you can see this whole space is over about 10 kilometers. And I'll go into how we sort of loaded the car parks to ensure social distancing. We'll get to that as we go along. Again, more parking. So we have the cinema parking in the Dubai Mall, and grand parking in the Dubai Mall was for the family ride only, or the family route only. So by 5 a.m. We were ready, set, and ready to open the route to general riders. By 5:15, so this is where sort of the safety element of which, one of the safety elements that we took care of. At 5 a.m. they left from the main start finish, which is known as D71. And by the time everybody, the main body passed this, which is DWTC, by the time they passed that and the road was clear, we then opened up the DWTC start finish. So there wasn't a merge of two groups of cyclists, basically. 5:15, the family ride opened as well. So the route was then open and they were allowed on. So the Coca-Cola, which was, if you weren't arriving by car, Dubai is a very car-orientated city. If you were not arriving by car and cycling to the event, you were directed to the Coca-Cola arena. It was the only place where you could cycle up to. Once D71 passed DWTC and DWTC had joined the ride, they had mounted this U-turn. So this U-turn, we removed the central barrier of the road for this and leveled it out and made sure everything was all good in the hours before we opened. So once these two start finishes passed the start finish line here, we then let the Coca-Cola arena people join the race from there. So everybody always had sort of a clear run whenever they got on. So 5:30 that opened. By 5:45, the exhibition parking and cinema parking opened. Again, I'll get into how we loaded this in a few moments. And then the VIPs, so we had various VIP guests who came along to the event, and they started from the Coca-Cola arena as well. The people of determination, or people with disabilities, they were then allowed onto the course from allowed onto the main course from 6:30 a.m. And then from 6:45, we started to have our close down procedures. So the DWTC start finish closed. We closed the car parks at 6:25, the processing areas closed at 6:40, and the start finish line closed at 6:45. So at 6:45, you were not allowed onto the track, onto the ride, at DWTC or at the Coca-Cola arena. The people of determination families, so the families with disabled children, were then allowed onto the family route. Last access to the family route was as soon as that group of participants progressed onto the course. Then at 7 a.m. we closed the start finish at D71 Financial Street Road. The car parks in that area closed at 6:40. The processing area closed at 6:55. The start finish line closed at 7 a.m. on the dot. So nobody was allowed, no new people were allowed onto the track at that time. Sorry. So the family ride then closed at 7 a.m. as well. Again, we had a similar close down procedure of car parks, processing areas, and start finish lines. So we had a group of ride ambassadors who are keen cyclists from around Dubai who would partake in various competition level, basically. They were our sweepers. So from 7:10, once the last groups of people had progressed, we let the ride ambassadors on, and they sort of created a sweep where they encouraged the last people to sort of hurry up so they could get to the dedicated exit points along the route before we closed them on them. So at 7:15, no cyclists were allowed past this point. Everybody got directed off. So this is sort of the start of the cutoff. So from 7:15 as well, at DWTC, the road was closed and everybody was directed to exit off here. from the D71, so Coca-Cola Arena. Again, we directed people off from there. We had a smaller entrance at Rta Road, 7:35. Everybody was directed off there. At 7:43, we expected the last cyclist to mount the U-turn coming back towards D71. By that time, 7:45, we had started the road opening procedures. We had to cut off a Business Bay Metro then at 7:50. At 7:55, there were absolutely no cyclists allowed to progress past this point. So everybody was taken off the road by then. We confirmed that all the roads were clear of cyclists by 7:55, and at 8 a.m. we opened up the Sheikh Zayed Road to traffic again. At 8:30, we handed back over the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Boulevard and the D71 Lower Financial Street area. So that was cleared of infrastructure by then and handed back over to the RTA and Dubai Police. By 11 a.m., we had full event infrastructure clearance. So everything that we brought in for the event was removed by 11 a.m. and nobody would ever have known that we were there, basically. So this is where our sort of loading of car parks.
Connor, I might just jump in there, folks. We look like my estimation, we're probably going to be about 10 minutes over times, and this is obviously really interesting, great presentation. Hopefully you can stay with us, but if you're not, obviously it's live streaming on Facebook, and we will be posting the recording. Yeah, hopefully there's still a good crowd on here, and hopefully you can stay with us for another 10 minutes or so. Sorry, Connor, sorry to interrupt you.
Not a problem, all good. So you can see our car parks that are mentioned here. So we've got Al Mustaqbal, exhibition parking, One Central, and the various other car parks. So these are our processing. In these car parks, we could do 700 cars every 15 minutes. So rather than have it free flowing that anybody could go to any car park, once you applied for your ticket, you were given a time slot, and that time slot correlated with the car park in which you were allowed to go to. So we would have one 15-minute slot would be coming in on this side of the track. Another 15 would be going in on this side of the track at DWTC, and then vice versa. So we always had the 15-minute windows. We ended up having 30 minutes before another time, 30 to 45 minutes before another time slot would end up going back into that car park. So that helped us with social distancing, where we had one car park space and then a spare space beside it. It helped with the flow through the car park. In Dubai, we had to keep 4 square meters per person. And again, the people going down to the start-finish line, it eased the pressure so that we just didn't have one section of the event getting loaded with people and another, because we only really had 2 hours to get everybody started on this. So it was a bit of a juggle. We pre-selected and loaded individual floors of the car park, depending on sort of which direction we thought people were coming from. So the processing areas, we had processing areas basically where you can see the arrows pointing to. The Coca-Cola Arena, for example, we had 7 processing lanes. We could process 1,260 people every 15 minutes. One Central, we could do 1,080 people every 15 minutes, and sort of so on and so forth. So our processing lanes ended up looking like this. So this is an example from D71 Financial Street. You can see here the red lanes are our standard lane. So at the bottom of each lane, we had thermal cameras. So as you approach the thermal camera, if you pinged a high temperature, you were taken aside. You were then sort of examined and taken to an isolation room, which we had nearby. You were seen by a medical professional. They took your temperature again, and if needed, you were then taken to a medical facility for further examination. So once you passed through the thermal scanners, you then moved on to the scan and bib, showed your QR code, they scanned it, and then you got given your number, which you peeled off, stuck on, and then you progressed on. In the blue lanes, this was if you pre-collected your bib, you were then given so you already had your bib, you've arrived down, you went through your thermal scan, and you could just cycle straight onto the track or onto the route. So with this, the reasoning behind this sort of section is that we were able to fit 1 to 2 extra lanes per sort of processing area, because we had 3 lanes that then merged into 1 lane, and we had 1 lane that then split into 3 processing lanes. And similarly, then we were able to fire them through here. So for processing, we worked out that we could do, the key one here is every 15 minutes for social distancing. So in the standard lanes, 540, and in the express lanes, 720, meaning that the total all lanes at this location was 1,260 people every 15 minutes. So we had a queue area which was 500 meters long and 12 meters wide, meaning that we could queue up 1,500 people. So we were always able to clear more people than we had arriving because of the loadings in which we did in the car parks. So we were always fairly confident that operating at max capacity, we always had the turnover, so we would never have a build-up of people where we ended up having all, 10,000 people in that section that were arriving there arrive at the one time. So again, we had a bit of play, bit of leeway between between the processing and the start of the route. We also had space there which we could fit 675 people. So that was a pressure release area. Basically, the pressure was building up, we could send more people up there, buy ourselves a little bit more time. So moving on, we had outdoor processing areas, we had indoor processing areas, we had processing areas inside car parks and undergrounds. So we sort of did this for each location that we had. I'm only going to give you a quick snapshot of sort of what we went through for that, but we always made sure that we could clear more people than we envisaged arriving. So the total processing, if COVID didn't exist, we could have processed in 60 minutes 28,800 people. Because COVID did exist, or if we go for the 30-minute, we could have done 14,000. Because COVID does exist and we had to do social distancing, the max we could do was 4,680 people every 30 minutes. We had 9,500 car park spaces, and our occupancy rates at 1.5 and at 2 were 14,250 and 19,000. So we had thermal scanners, both handhelds as backup. So we employed a laser or thermal scanning system throughout, and then had backups just in case they went down. Our isolation tents, which we had multiple at all locations where we were processing people. We had touchless hand sanitizers at all points where we were, where anybody was touching anything, a barrier, wherever it may have been. We had a sponsor who took care of supplying all of those for us. For our mobile ambulances, we had various ambulances, we had motorbikes, we had segways, we had scooters, we had on foot. We were very, very, very well supported by the DHA, the Dubai Health Authority, for the ambulances. Mechanical assistance, you got a flat tire. We had cars or trucks that came and helped you out. If you were unable to finish the race for various reasons, we had buses that followed with the sweeps and put you on the bus and put your bike on a trailer that we had behind. And to give you an idea of how many people it took to pull this off on the actual day, Link Viva had 35 staff, JAM provided 12 staff. We had 150 ushers, 350 security, 132 traffic marshals, 100 crew. DTCM provided us with 50 volunteers, and we had 140 ride ambassadors. And that brings me to the end.
Wow. Fantastic race to the finish line. Thank you so much. Some really, really great, insights there. I'm just going to launch a quick poll while I wrap that up. Thank you, Connor. You've done us very proud just to be 5 minutes over at the moment, and I'll try and keep to that 10 minutes that I asked people to stick around a little bit. A couple of things for me there. You spoke about the alternate parking slots, ease the pressure, and so on. One of the things that I am starting to see from some of these events is people are saying things that we've been forced to do from a COVID perspective actually are probably things that will be here to stay. And maybe that's kind of one of the things that's going to, one of your learnings is to help that kind of flow. Got a couple of questions, or one question I've seen here. I will get to that in a moment. Obviously, one of the things there, looking at it, from my perspective, massive wide streets, lots of space, not the kind of luxury that everyone all over the world has. Clearly a cashed up and supportive backer as well, which I'm sure made it an absolute pleasure for you. That whole principle that you shared there of making sure that you're clearing more than are arriving. And, so I think so often people get caught up, even in a normal event, non-COVID times, once that queue starts to build up, it becomes very difficult, doesn't it? So that whole premise of how do we clear them before the others arrive, to give us that clarity. But yeah, some wonderful insights. Thank you so much. I'm just going to pop this testing and vaccine. So the question was asking whether people have mechanics for testing and vaccination. 24% yes to both, 31% yes to COVID-19, 3% or 7%, sorry, to vaccination, and 38% have no ability to be able to track that. Let me just pop that in there and people can have a look at that as I share the results. Yeah, we just got a couple of minutes now. If anyone's got any questions, I have one or two here. Ulrika Bonham from Eventico. Hello there, Ulrika. Very impressive plan. How did you manage to coordinate all on the event day and ensure all parties involved were up to date on what they did? Did you use any specific tools for that? Sounds like a great plug for Eventico, Ulrika, but I'll let Connor answer that question.
So we managed to coordinate. We had an event control room, which was active for 24 hours. So it was a 24-hour day, basically. Everything we had trained, we brought in 12 of our own event staff who were put in strategic zones around. So they're well-trained individuals who were able to be our eyes and ears. We did not have CCTV. So they were our eyes and ears who were able to give us live, real-time feedback. And similarly, I showed you the timeline on how things happened. That was the condensed timeline. We had a spreadsheet that had tasks at least every 60 seconds for 4 hours that had to be complete. So we had 3 people on radios 3 people dedicated to radios who were just consistently checking off, is this done, is this not done, is this done, is this not done. So it was it was not to the wire, it was very controlled. We operated extremely efficiently, however, it was very stressful.
I think Ulrika might be able to help you with a solution there. Anonymous attendee, how did your staffing compare to a normal non-COVID event? Were staffing levels higher or lower?
For me?
Yeah.
They were higher. We had more people, I would say maybe 50% higher. And that was made up more of the staffing and volunteers. So the people who were at the sanitization stations, or we have COVID safety officers or social distance ambassadors who would remind people to be socially distanced. That that sort of type of staffing just didn't exist before, you know. So from an operational point of view, no, we didn't have any additional staff. We could have operated with the same level of staff without COVID, but yeah, yeah. Okay,
awesome, thank you. We are out of time. I'm just going to throw that question in a word. Richard and Dave, were your levels higher or lower?
Ours were higher for that same reason that we had COVID safety marshals to walk around, do additional cleaning, those sorts of things, reinforce all the things.
Thank you. And Richard?
Ours were about 10% higher, but I also pointed out to all the existing people that they also had to play a bit of a role in this and empowered them to sort of be on top of the COVID message throughout the event. So the message from me to everyone was it's everyone's responsibility, even though there'll be some dedicated people.
Okay, thank you. One last one. I know we're over that 10 minutes, but let's just take it quickly. Paul Astley, if any of the participants broke the rules, what were the consequences and how did you communicate this? Let's throw that to you again, Connor, I think.
So nobody broke the rules, and Dubai and the UAE, they've handled the COVID situation very well. They've communicated the reasons behind the rules. You do not see a single person not wearing a mask. Social distancing is observed. People don't crowd into lifts. We do not have an issue of people breaking the rules. I have worked on events where alcohol is involved and we try to enforce social distancing. That's where the rules get broken. But on an event like this, no problem. Like, again, if somebody did break the rules, it's very easy to ask security, or I'm sure there's a policeman not too far away that can help with the situation.
Yeah, our situation, probably similar to Richard's, was different because there's nothing mandatory at the moment other than what's imposed on us, on participants or spectators. I think you'll find generally participants will comply. It's the spectators that are harder to manage generally. I think that's been discussed widely.
Good point. Yeah. Okay. Great, thank you. Well, I think that's a wrap. Join me virtually in thanking our three presenters: Connor Rainey from Dubai, Dave Budge, Perth in Western Australia, and Richard Welsh. A late night for you there, Richard. Really appreciate you staying up in Hobart, Tasmania. Sleep well. Just a very quick wrap. Reminder on Monday, strength in numbers, Monday afternoon Singapore time and Tuesday morning Singapore time for the US market and Australia, New Zealand. The World Athletics one on next Thursday, which should be amazing. Thursday the 18th, 1 hour later than the time we started. A very, very late night for you, Richard. I think you'll watch the recording of that. And the road ahead will go out tomorrow, and that'll have some details of all the other initiatives that we've got on, and the next webinar on the 25th of March. A very big thank you for joining us. Thanks for those that stayed the extra mile to get us past the hour. Thanks again, our panelists. Go well, stay safe, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.